What's up, Lace Network? This is Escroll, and I'll be walking you through how to set up your Ghost Sneakers bot, working with version 2.8.0. Alright, so before we get started, there's a couple of things that you should already have checked off to make sure that this is as smooth of a setup as it possibly can be. Looking over our requirements really quick. So the first is the environment. This will be the location that you want to set your bot up in. For this example, I'm using a Google Cloud server. You can use your own computer, personal, borrowed, or your own server. Any's fine. Just make sure you have enough memory to run it. You're going to want Nike accounts. Following that, you're going to want proxies, and of course, payment methods. It's virtual, real, either or is fine. So with that, let's start going into the bot and walk you through what you need to do to get your tasks loaded up and ready to go for drop day. So what we want to do is head over to the settings tab on the top right. And here in the settings tab, you're going to take care of two of those four requirements right off the bat and load up all your accounts and your proxies. So all you really have to do is just copy and paste your information according to the format that they ask you. So for accounts, it's email, password. And for proxies, you can just copy them basically as they're printed out to you by your provider. They're usually in the format already. Something to keep in mind about the account section is that once you save, it's going to count up all the accounts in this little box, right? So here I have 3 demos. This does not mean that these accounts are verified, so don't confuse that with verification. This simply is counting up all the rows that are in this box. And the same thing would apply for proxies. So if I hit enter, hit save, it thinks there's 1201. There isn't. That last one was made up. So don't throw yourself off. What I have here is I typed in 3 samples just for the sake of working through this demonstration. Proxies loaded in, and a good check to have that you know your proxies are good is just coming back to the main page and having the upcoming releases load up. If you have this loaded up, your proxies are working, you basically have connection and stuff's ready to go on the back end. Next, we're going to take care of those payment methods, and how we do that is by heading over to profiles. So you'll basically do very straightforward here, just fill out all the information. Actually, realistically, you only need to fill out the address, city, state, and postal code. The reason I say that is because Ghost offers this neat little modify function when you create tasks that makes this pretty simple to tweak, so you don't have to do it yourself. Every time you load up your sneaker software, you're going to be given a test profile. You can try to delete it, does not matter. Every time you close it and open it again, it'll always be there. So keep that in mind for the day that you're actually going to set up your tasks. If you forget to delete it, it's just going to misalign everything, and you're basically going to have some dead tasks because the test profile doesn't do anything. So here's an example on the test profile. Yours might be the same, it might be different. So how you go about making new profiles is very straightforward. You just change what's already here. So let's just say that you wanted to make a quick modification to this. Any random letter. That's basically it. We'll leave this the same. You would change the card to your new card. So, and then rename this to test. Hit save. And when you look down your list, now have test at the bottom. And so you just repeat this process for however many payment methods you have. You can name them anything you want, and you just go about that. Fill it out as you would please. Something to note, just because it gets asked frequently, if you're using virtual cards, you could put any name, any number, billing information, does not matter either. So you can have it be the same as this. If they're not, you can still have a modified shipping, but you likely want to have an accurate billing information if it's your real card. I've heard instances where both shipping and billing are modified with a real card. That decision is completely up to you. Okay, so based on our requirements, we pretty much got everything loaded in already. Accounts, proxies, payment method, and obviously our environment. So let's go ahead and actually create tasks for a shoe that you want. Very straightforward. Ghost is very nice and friendly to the user in making this as simple as possible. So let's say we wanted to grab this pair of kicks. All we have to really do is just click on it. One of the quick drawbacks to the upcoming releases in this software is that it only shows you the next 3 releases in sequential order. Now, for example, this Jordan 12, there's actually a grade school and adult size coming out. So say you did want the Jordan 12 of the adult size, you would actually need to track down the SKU number. You can find that from our monitors. Our sneakers monitor, whenever it triggers for a new release or an update in the sneakers app, it'll show you the shoe. It'll also have the SKU. Let's just select the shoe to work with because it's right here. Make it very simple. let's go down the boxes. You select the size you're interested in. Say I want to get a personal, size 12. You select the profile you want to run it on. So this is your billing profile. So there's a use all profiles, but I'll go through that in a minute. So right now, let's just say we want to keep it straightforward. I have one particular card I want to use. This is dropping on the sneakers app. And this quantity section, this is what makes this pretty unique and resourceful. So basically this quantity means how many times you want to create this task. So this is for one billing account, one size, one quantity. Now down here, these three boxes are what I mentioned earlier. We're pointing back to the billing profiles, how I said that it didn't really matter what you put for name, number, or even the apartment. So that modifying comes here. So you can just click on random name, random apartment, and random phone number, and it'll generate that information into your billing profile. It's not going to save that information. It just generates a task with randomized information so that your info is tweaked. So let's say we wanted to keep it this straightforward. I just wanted size 12. Hit create, hit over the view task, and there it is. Size 12, SKU, the first email, the profile I selected, and ready to go whenever I want. And that's all it is to create a particular task. Now, here's a utility of quantity when you select multifunction. It grays out the singular selection, and it's going to be based off of what is here. And this is the format that Ghost uses. So say the actual profitable sizes for this shoe were 9.5 high and say 6 low. So there you go. And here's, I'm going to modify this section and say use all profiles, because that's realistically what's going to happen. So here's how the calculation works. When you create a task, now, using all profiles, for every quantity I have, it's going to replicate that multiplicatively by the number of profiles I have, because I'm using all of them now. So before I only used one, and my quantity was 1. So 1 times 1, 1 task created. Now, if I use all profiles, and say you have 10 billing profiles, and you select 2, well, 10 times 2, 20. So now you're going to create 20 tasks, and so it's going to use up 20 accounts. So that's how this calculation is done, so that you don't lose track, because this is very important when it comes to how many accounts you have, how many proxies you have, how many billing profiles you have. This is where that ratio that is commonly asked of us, what it should be, what's the ideal ballpark. So for the sake of example, use all my billing profiles. I know how many I have. So say 5, right? Let's create the task and see what that looks like. So we're over here to task. Let's go ahead and delete this size 12. So these are all the tasks now. And as I mentioned, it takes all of your billing profiles and multiplies it by 5. So, I mean, this is probably like 40 profiles. So times 5, that's going to be somewhere around 200. And so 205. And that's because of the tests. So that is how that function works. So if I had 200 accounts, that's how I would set up these 200 accounts. So you don't have to do one at a time. You keep that calculation in your head. Now, something else that's very important to mention is the accounts themselves. It's possible that you won't have a easily multiplicative number, like you might have like 18 or 17. Like, well, 17 times 5. Like, well, damn. You know, like, do I have the exact number of accounts that is multiplicative by whatever amount of billing profiles I have? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. This is where it's important to keep track. I loaded in 3 dummy profiles, right? So the way that Ghost works, it works its way from the top down. Notice that on this random list, it started with email 2. So the reason it did that was because my task 0 was still there, and it's using email 1. So when it creates this new task, it's going to pick up where it left off and use 2. And then it goes to 3. Now since I only have 3, it goes back and uses 1 again. And then it just repeats. This is important because running the same account twice for the same shoe can lead to your account being banned, because you're not allowed to be buying duplicates on one account. You want to make sure that everything's clean. You only have one account running, at least for the same shoe. If it's different shoes, it's completely fine. So I can't be running 200 tasks because I only have 3 accounts. I could only run 3 tasks. And that's how that works. That's why Nike accounts are very important. So make sure you keep this clean. All you got to do is just hit run. The first thing it's going to want to do is get the SKE info. You know it's going well when it selects the size for you. So when you actually run the task on multi-sizing, it will select a random size in that range. So since the floor was 6, the ceiling was 9.5. When I hit play, once it gets the SKU, it'll select a size in that range. So this is how you do the get as many as you can for every size that you can. Now, if you didn't want multi-sizing and you just wanted to get one shoe and a lot of that shoe because there's only one good shoe, then you don't have to select multi-sizing. You could just select that one good size, same setup with quantity, all your profiles, and all these tasks would be the same size. So what you want to get to, the screen here, would be starting at drop time. So it will literally say starting at like 7 or 10, whatever your local time is. And that's basically it. That's all there is to it. Just a little bit of math. Once you get your info in here, you're ready to go. Now, before I call it an end and roll the credits, there's a couple things I kind of want to go over. So, errors and possible solutions. So there's a couple things that can go wrong or seem wrong with your bot, and these are the very common ones, so I just wanted to list them here and kind of just go through them to make sure it's understood and you kind of know what to do when this happens. So the first is error loading the upcoming releases, which is basically this front page. If you don't get these top three, try changing your locale to US or GB or whatever, or verify and authenticate your proxies. You likely will get the error just because there are no proxies there, so load them up, make sure they're authenticated. If you authenticated with your home IP and then you go into your server, load up your proxies, and they don't work, this is why. Because your home IP is not your server IP, so make sure you authenticate with the server. Authenticate with both, or just the server, wherever they're going to be ran. So once you take care of that, you should be able to load up, and that's a very common error that happens a lot. The second is that Ghost doesn't start up at all. There's a couple different error messages that can pop up. If that's the case, try uninstalling and reinstall. Restarting it should be all it takes, but if it doesn't work, uninstalling and reinstalling the solidified will work for sure. The third possible error, this has to do with the tasks specifically. So, viewing these tasks and they're trying to run, there's one particular error that states that your task is stuck. It'll actually have the words awaiting for product. It's basically just not changing the status. If you get a stuck status, verify your region on your profiles. Sometimes people forget. They don't set anything here and they just leave it blank, or it's not saved. The other is just updating of proxies. A lot of the errors that you can come across is just having bad proxies. Now to close this out, there are a couple of ProLace tips I kind of want to share with you guys, just to kind of help you one way, shape, or form, either setting up or the day of the drop. This is information that may have been mentioned already, or you may already know, or you may not know. So the first one, mention it during this demo, utilize all your accounts, learn math, right? This is in reference to the quantity and how many billing profiles you have. If you're not good at math, bust out your favorite calculator and you'll be all set. Second and third are related to ratios. So this is just bringing up the profile to accounts ratios and proxies to account ratios. It's right here on the notes. 1-to-1 is ideal. If not, you can go up to 3-to-1. And if you don't have enough billing profiles, you can go up to 5-to-1. There are instances where people just go with more. It's subjective. It's up to you. Just be wary of what comes at that utilization cost. The more checkouts you make with the same card, the more likely it is that an order might get canceled. So just keep that in mind when you increase the ratios. Proxies to accounts, bare minimum 1-to-1, just because each user should have its own proxy. You could span that up and give each user 3 proxies. It does not hurt. You can go even more than that. Nothing wrong with having more proxies available for your account. The fourth one actually has to do with the type of release. So when it comes to a DAN, that's a raffle, depending on how much time they give you to enter. So when it comes to a DAN, you want to maximize your entries. So what that means is you can make the argument that the second point of profile to accounts, that this can be thrown out the window. When it comes to a DAN, not every single task you run is going to encounter a checkout. It's only going to be the ones that are selected. In that instance, if you think about it, it's better to just maximize your entries. So just throw out the ratios and just get every account in there, because it's all about just getting the ballot in. Now, once they get selected, then you can deal with the ratio of having the same card charged twice or 3 times or 4 times. But because you won't even get to that instance unless the account is selected, that's where you get the proposed idea of just getting as many accounts in as you possibly can. Now for Leo, The key there is to minimize cancellation. And this is the complete opposite, right? You don't want to have too big of a ratio of profile to account, because then you're going to get cancellations. With the Leo, the idea is that every task that you run will encounter a checkout at some point, assuming that it's able to get the cookie, it's able to log in, your proxies are good, your accounts are good. If everything's good, it's going to try to check out. So the profile to accounts is much more of a direct impact here. So you want to minimize the cancellation. So you probably want to stick tighter to the ratios that we recommend. That's the fourth point. And the last one is to check your start time, boys. Like, check your start time. Now, this is getting a little bit more technical into the weeds of what Ghost is doing. So this is directly pointing at what has happened recently. So I won't get too much into it, but basically there has been an update to Ghost where regardless of when you run your task, it's going to assign you a start time. And this is exactly the same string that it would give you, getting cookie at whatever time. I'm on PST, so you're going to be seeing PST values, right? So usually the drop is at 7 a.m. PST. This is very important. The bot needs time to get the cookie. If your bot doesn't get enough time, that task is going to become virtually useless. It's not going to play a role. In terms of a Dan, it very likely will not have enough time to get the cookie to put in an entry. If it's a Leo, it may not have enough time to get to the checkout process. They might be sold out by that point. So keep an eye on your start times. There's a big difference between your task of getting the cookie starts at 5 and at 6:59. Big difference. So what to do in this circumstance is just keep an eye out for the tasks. The reason that this is happening is Ghost is responding with updates from a DDoS attack, so there is an influx of a lot of cookie generation happening at the same time. So their response to try to throttle that huge bottleneck of everybody trying to generate cookies, even though it may or may not be real people. Obviously we're all bots, right? It's not really real people, but in the response of the large influx of data trying to be generated at the same time, they throttle it by creating this queue of assigning your task a particular start point. And so the later your task is, the less likely it'll be to actually generate, because getting cookies can take some time. Now, there's no science to it right now, but I'm just speaking from experience. This past week when we had the J1 Satins drop, if your task started like at 6:15 or after, you did not get a cookie generated. So those tasks were basically dead. So with everybody being told to start your task an hour or an hour and a half before drop time, that means that all the cookie generation is going to happen in that segment. But if you start it before that, and you got sometimes early in, like in this example, right early in the 5, very likely by the time you got to like 6:30, when this entire ingestion's happening, you're already set. This is what you want to see, boys. This is what the last status is before the actual drop time. It is starting at 7 a.m. PST. Once you reach this, your task is ready to go. It got the cookie. It's locked and loaded, and boom, you're set. You can walk away and go to sleep. Hopefully there's no errors and you come back with some W's. With that being said, Laced Network, if you're going to run this, start as early as possible. I run all tasks, whether it's the 200, 100, 50, 5, more than that. I run them all. I wait for them all to get to this segment, and I see what time they're given to start their queue. If I think that's too late, and if there's a lot of them, I'm pretty down to just delete them and create that task over again and hope that it gets a better time. And this is if you really, really, really want that shoe. If you're comfortable just saying, okay, well, that's too late, I have a lot more tasks that are pretty solid, you can just delete that task altogether. Like, do everybody else a favor and just don't be congestion. Like, if you got 800 tasks, man, and I'm being serious, if you got 800 running and there's like 50 that are just starting in the last 10 minutes, like, do everyone else in the group a favor and just delete them. Give them a shot at the people that only got like 5 or 10, right? Do you really need those last 50? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. That's all I'm saying, fam. That's all I'm saying. Now, in the instance where you only have 5 or 10 and they all got like this time right here, that is scary. So I would highly recommend you just delete that and just recreate them and rerun them again. You get a better start time like this, money. Now if they change it and they throttle back another hour and you got this, even better. When it comes to them updating for the throttle, they're doing tests as to how long your cookie can hold on without being lost, because some of the responses that Nike has given is to force cancel or force delete your cookie after a certain amount of time. So they're testing how long they could hold on to that cookie without having you to restart. Ghost is doing what they can to improve their bandwidth, improve the ingestion, and also test to see if they have to throttle again, how far back can they go. They felt comfortable going back 2 hours, and I mean, it was pretty good. So don't let that defer yourself. Don't lose confidence, and over time, like, you're just gonna be a head chef. You do your homework, watch stuff like this, be prepared. Sure enough, you're gonna be living the spice life. So that's all I got for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to submit a ticket at me, ask your questions. We're all here to help support and make sure you're all set up. Best of luck, and I'll see you guys in the Discord. Peace.